Hi everyone, this is Debbie from Dior Design and Decor. In today's video, we are going to be creating an elegant vintage book. I'm going to be using a hardcover book that I've thrifted, so I want to give it a really good prime. I use Wise Owl Primer. Now you can use any primer that you have on hand, but I do like the Wise Owl Primer because it gives such great coverage. If you're going to be painting red over it, I would suggest using the gray primer. And we have a light gray and a dark gray. And I use the dark gray if I'm doing like navies and dark purples. But if I'm using reds and pinks and jewel tones, I like to use a light gray primer. It just goes over well. The coverage is so much better. But today, because I'm using a bone shade, I am doing the white primer. I use a synthetic brush. Here I'm using a wide synthetic brush. It just gives better coverage. I'm also making sure that I catch all of the edges. Since I'm using decoupage, I want to make sure that there's no black showing through. So just be sure you catch those edges and make sure you are careful not to have any collection of paint or primer under there. So you want to make sure there's no drips. You want to make sure you grab them all. Make sure you get the spine of the book. I'm not going to be priming the bottom right now because I want to get through this video and show you how this is done, but I would go back and prime and paint the bottom of the book as well. I also like to turn the cover over, open it up, and catch the black on the inside, because in the end, I will be making sure that all of the pages are stuck together. I don't like to be able to have that book open later, and I'm going to show you how to do that too. So since the book will be closed, you will be able to still see the underneath area, just this little small area that I'm painting right now. And you don't have to be perfect about it because the book will be closed and you won't be able to open it back up. So that's it. Just go along the edge as best you can. Clean up any spilt paint. And there you have it. It is primed and ready to go. Now I've taken the time off camera to finish the back side. I'm using a piece of recycled decoupage paper, and I've torn the edges. I like the look. Sometimes you can just use a little water method, which is taking a little brush, putting water on it, going along the edges, and then it rips much easier. So that's what I like to do, is make sure I know exactly where I want it to fit. And I'm using here Wise Owl Bone Chalk Synthesis Paint. I love using chalk paints. You can use acrylics as well, but I love using chalk paints. I think that the coverage is even, and it just gives me a much better base for putting my decoupage on top. Now you notice that I'm just going up and down, nice even coverage, and because of the primer, the paint is gripping to the book. It's a beautiful shade. I like to, especially if I'm ripping the decoupage paper, I want the base of the book to have the same tone as the decoupage paper, and you'll notice that it does have the same tone. Again, you want to make sure you get all the edges. And then make sure you check to make sure there's no drippage just by a nice long swipe of the brush. Look how pretty that is. I absolutely love that shade. And now I've done all the sides, I've done the spine, and it's all perfectly covered with paint. Now let's take a look at where I'd like to place this. Make sure you know where you'd like to put it. We will be trimming the edges off later with a little sandpaper, and I'll show you how that's done. Now, I put my Mod Podge into a plastic container. It's a condiment container you can pick up at the dollar store. But I like putting it in there because then I can just squirt out what I need and there's not much waste. Make sure you put a really nice amount. Spread it evenly. Try not to miss any spots because if you do, you will have bubbles in your decoupage paper. So be sure that you check constantly. See, you can see where the light picks it up. It's a little shinier. Catch that spine. Make sure you don't miss any spots. That's perfect. I guess I'm making sure that I don't miss any spots there, especially on the edge. If you want a little bit of that paper to go over the edge, you want to make sure you have the Mod Podge there. Now, I'm going to be doing the iron-on method. So I'm going to dry the Mod Podge all the way. I like to do this method. It's much easier and you do not get any wrinkles. Totally wrinkle-free. And I'm going to show you how that's done right now. But first, I want to make sure that my Mod Podge is completely dry. Now you can use a heat tool for this or a hair dryer. And now it's completely dry. We're going to take the decoupage paper by Roycycled. I'll drop a link in the description for all of the items that I'm using today. I'm lining it up where I want it to be. And I take my parchment paper and lay it right over the top and my craft iron. You can use a regular iron that you have at home. Just be sure that you do not have it on steam. You don't want any steam coming out. I like my little craft iron. I'll also drop a link for the one that I use. It is so easy. It heats perfectly, very quickly, and it does a great job. Now, what I'm doing here is making sure that I get into that little indentation where the book cover opens, because I don't want to miss that whole section. I want it to be perfectly attached. No bubbles. And there it is. No wrinkles. Perfect. Now, I go a little bit out of the camera when I do the spine. Sorry about that. But it's the same thing. I'm taking my craft iron and running it all along the edge, making sure that I don't miss any spots. And I pay particular attention to the edges. I want to make sure that the edges are down really well. I guess I want to do one more little over with the iron. Make sure that's down completely. There you go. Now you can see it. These books are so much fun to create, and you can do them for just about any holiday. I've got some Halloween and Christmas books also that I'll be posting. Now, I like to take just a little sandpaper. I use a very a high grit, nothing too harsh. And all it does is pull off that additional paper that hangs over the edge. And most of the time, because you've primed and painted, it doesn't really pull the paint up as you sandpaper. But if it does, you can just touch it up. Making sure that I get all the edges even on the spine. Just very gentle. You'll notice the angle. It's about a 45-degree angle, and I just go in one direction, straight down. Pull that right off. There you go. Nice and smooth, no rough edges. And there we have it. Found another spot at the top that needs to be taken off. We'll make sure that is a nice smooth edge. I guess it was being a little fussy there. Next step is cover it up with Mod Podge. You want to make sure that you seal the book. I like to use the matte Mod Podge. I just like the look of matte. I'm not a glossy girl. I like to have that matte feel and that matte look. But you can use any surface that you want. You can, if you want it glossy, you can make it glossy. I guess there's a time and a place for everything. But for this vintage look, I liked it with a matte finish. Now, I'm not sure I showed it in this video, but I do go around the entire book, even if it's not decoupaged on the back, and I give it a good cover of the Mod Podge so that it has that same feel and it's sealed properly. And here I've added a bow and a molding and just added to the adorable book. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.